Prince William just scored a new piece of property and it's worth over $1 billion. Yeah, that's billion. Changing of royal titles and transitions of assets after Queen Elizabeth's death. Looks like William, who's now first in line to the throne.
Picture this. A pale February morning in Windsor. Inside Buckingham Palace, a woman reads a letter from a queen, long dead. 4 words make the room freeze. Even in death, she leaves me caged. How can a monarch control the living from beyond the grave? What secret did Elizabeth II hide that left Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles powerless? This isn't just inheritance, it's strategy, secrecy, and a decades-long power play that no one saw coming. The secret that lasted 80 years. Let me take you back. Not to 2026, but to 1944. The world is at war. Bombs are falling on London. The future of Britain itself is uncertain. And in the middle of all that chaos, King George VI does something no one will know about for the next 8 decades. He quietly purchases an estate tucked deep in the Chiltern Hills, right on the border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. He calls it the Cedar Estate, and from the very first day, it is designed to be invisible. No registry listing, no media announcement, no ceremony. Nothing. For over 80 years, this property existed only in the whispered conversations of the most senior royal insiders. A shadow estate, protected by the very few people who knew it was there. Now stop and think about that for a second. Why would the royal family keep a property hidden for 80 years? What could possibly be inside it that needed that kind of silence? And the answer came on the morning of February 3, 2026, when Buckingham Palace released a quiet 2-paragraph statement that detonated like a bomb inside every royal household and legal chamber in Britain. Prince William had been named sole beneficiary of the Cedar Estate, and when the details of what was inside that estate became public, even the most seasoned royal historians went silent. But the Cedar Estate contains a private chapel with an engraved memorial vault honoring royal family members who served in armed conflict. It holds 186 oak chests filled with personal wartime correspondence and confidential royal communications, 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including never-before-seen paintings of King George VI and Princess Margaret. And here is the part that gave me chills. 14 sealed audio recordings of Queen Elizabeth II in private conversation with Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Charles de Gaulle. One archivist who had spent his entire career working within the Royal Archives described the collection in a single phrase that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said it wasn't a museum of history, it was the raw, unfiltered architecture of royal memory. A window into the private soul of the monarchy itself. But here is what makes this transfer truly extraordinary. Between 2017 and 2021, while the rest of the world was watching royal dramas unfold on television, Prince William had been quietly visiting the Cedar Estate on private weekends. Not for ceremony, not for photo opportunities. He walked the cedar groves with his grandmother. He reviewed wartime letters. He personally cataloged naval dispatches. He refiled hundreds of letters from Second World War soldiers. And he even repaired moisture control systems in the archival chambers with his own hands. No cameras, no credit, no audience. Just a grandson doing the quiet, invisible work of preserving something precious. And the Queen noticed. In a handwritten note found within the trust documents, she wrote words that feel like they hold the weight of the entire story. He will inherit more than the crown, and he will inherit the silence that preserved it.
A future king and queen in training. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have stepped up in recent months and are proving that they're ready to take on the throne.
The legal fortress. Now, we need to talk about how Elizabeth made this transfer completely untouchable. Because the legal architecture behind it is just as extraordinary as the estate itself. And honestly, it might be even more impressive. Most people don't realize this, but the British monarchy operates under a system of inheritance secrecy that goes back over 100 years. When Prince Philip died in 2021, a High Court judge ruled that his will would be sealed.
Britain is mourning the death of Prince Philip, husband to Queen Elizabeth,
And locked in the President of the Family Division's private safe for at least 90 years. 90 years. That means no journalist, no family member outside the inner circle, no member of the public will see what Philip left behind until roughly the year 2011. And Philip's will was not an exception. There are currently more than 30 sealed royal envelopes sitting in that safe, each one containing the final wishes of a deceased senior royal, each one protected by centuries of legal convention. This tradition dates all the way back to 1910, when the will of Prince Francis of Teck was sealed because it reportedly contained legacies that would have embarrassed the royal family if they'd been made public. Since then, the wills of Princess Margaret, the Queen Mother, and now Prince Philip have all been locked away behind layers of legal protection that ordinary citizens simply cannot access. But here is where Elizabeth's situation was different from every other royal who came before her. Because she was the sovereign, the source of legal authority itself, her will did not even require probate. Let that sink in. Under a legal precedent established in 1822 in the case of King George III's estate, the courts have no jurisdiction over the monarch's will. It does not have to be filed. It does not have to be published. It does not have to be reviewed by any judge. The sovereign's will exists entirely outside the reach of the legal system that governs everyone else in the country, which means Elizabeth had something no other member of her family possessed: total, absolute, unchallengeable privacy over how she distributed her personal wealth. And she used every ounce of it. The Cedar estate does not fall under the Crown estate, which is the massive public portfolio of royal lands managed by a semi-independent board. It does not fall under the Duchy of Cornwall, the private estate that automatically passes to the heir to the throne, which William inherited when Charles became king. Instead, it exists under a completely separate private mechanism, a covenant trust created in 2020, filed under a sealed charter, and witnessed by the Queen's personal solicitor, a constitutional advisor, and a notary from the Royal Archives. 3 witnesses, 3 layers of verification, and a delayed activation clause designed to trigger only after 2 specific conditions were met: the conclusion of the Queen's state funeral and the formal public recognition of William as heir to institutional responsibility. Both conditions have now been fulfilled. The transfer is immediate and irreversible. Think about what that means from a legal standpoint. Elizabeth did not just write William's name in a will and hope for the best. She constructed a mechanism that sat dormant for years, invisible to everyone who might challenge it, and only came to life when the precise circumstances she had anticipated actually occurred. She built a legal time bomb with a 2-key ignition, and she handed both keys to the future. This was not a woman leaving property to her grandson. This was a constitutional mind operating at the highest level of strategic planning, using every privilege her unique legal position afforded her to build something that could not be undone, could not be contested, and could not be redirected by anyone who came after her. And that is exactly where the story shifts from inheritance to war. Because not everyone received this news with grace. Camilla and Tom's grand designs. Multiple sources have confirmed what palace insiders had long suspected. Queen Camilla and her son, Tom Parker Bowles, had been quietly, persistently, and strategically maneuvering to bring the Cedar estate under their control for years. Starting in late 2024, Camilla began pushing internally for what she called a Windsor Cultural Legacy Center. On the surface, it sounded noble. Gourmet retreats, literary salons, historical tours through the cedar groves. But underneath the polished pitch, her son Tom saw something very different when he looked at that property. He saw money. Private memos show he had been developing plans for a Michelin-grade restaurant inside the old hunting lodge, an artisanal food brand called Royal Wild, and elite private events targeting wealthy international clients. A commercial empire dressed up in the clothing of royal heritage. Then, in October 2025, a leaked briefing note changed everything. Tom's legal team had been exploring whether they could reclassify parts of the estate under public heritage law, arguing that its wartime origins justified it. If successful, this would have weakened William's exclusive claim and opened the door to shared management. In November, Camilla hosted a private event near Henley-on-Thames, inviting heritage donors, food critics, and art historians. One guest later described it as a trial balloon for a model that would let Camilla's foundation and outside donors share control of the estate. William learned of the event. He declined to participate. And 3 weeks later, he activated the Covenant Trust.
You all together and, to work cohesively and that's really worked well. It's been fantastic.
The Queen's final checkmate. But the Cedar Estate was only the beginning. On January 31st, 2026, the land registry updated to reflect the transfer of Northacre Hall, a sprawling 1,200-acre heritage property in Wiltshire. The Queen had reclassified it from a shared Crown estate asset to a personal sovereign holding just weeks before her death, ensuring she could transfer it privately through her will. In an appendix, she wrote, "Let Northacre remain with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be not merely shelter, but sanctuary." Camilla and Tom had already been lobbying to turn it into a luxury culinary heritage venture, backed by investors from the UAE and Paris. A 5-star boutique hotel, a heritage cooking school, a complete commercial rebranding. A feasibility study valued the licensing rights alone at over £48 million. But the transfer had already been completed, and one courtier put it perfectly. Camilla believed she had soft-bought the estate through influence. The Queen outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. Then came Clarence Hill. In mid-January 2026, Princess Anne discovered a document folded 3 times, secured in a leather folio bearing the initials WG, William George. It was a directive in the Queen's own handwriting. "I entrust Clarence Hill to my grandson William in full title and spirit, free of encumbrance, free of shadow. Let it remain outside the Crown estate, immune to politics, immune to scandal. This land is a covenant, not a commodity." Camilla learned of the transfer on January 20th and immediately summoned her legal team. Tom had already registered a new company called Hill and Crown Limited, with himself as executive director. Their plan was to rebrand Clarence Hill into a boutique hospitality brand. But the legal transfer had already been completed. Hill and Crown arrived 3 weeks too late. Then a whistleblower leaked the entire business deck to the Lord Chancellor's office, and the backlash was total. William confronted Camilla at Windsor. He reportedly told her, "Clarence Hill does not exist to be bottled, branded, or sold. It is the last sanctuary of my grandmother's soul, and I will protect it as I protect my wife and children." Camilla left without finishing her meal. And still, it wasn't over. Greystone Downs came next. 400 acres of ancient woodland, to a Tudor hunting lodge, a private stone chapel with 17th century relics, valued at £80 million. Tom had registered yet another holding company in Luxembourg. Plans included converting the chapel into a mindfulness retreat and the stables into a wellness spa. Princess Anne intercepted a confidential email between Camilla's lawyer and a member of the House of Lords, and her assessment was ice cold. She's not challenging the crown. She's challenging mother's ethics. William assembled a legal counteroffensive. The sealed document, written and notarized by the Queen in 2021, explicitly barred any commercial conversion of Greystone Downs without William's express approval. Elizabeth had anticipated this challenge years before it was ever made. When Camilla read the document, she read it twice in silence. Then she spoke those 4 words: "Even in death, she leaves me caged." Then came Greenheath Estate, the over 500 acres of protected woodland, accompanied by a £37 million private trust the Queen had been building in the background for decades. Tom had been planning a media-branded culinary wellness center backed by Dubai investors. Camilla had allegedly promised to use her position to secure royal endorsement. Promotional dinners were being planned. Invitations were being drafted. The machine was running. And then, on January 30th, Princess Anne sealed the transfer. William received everything. That evening, a royal sedan delivered to Clarence House not only the final documents, but a private audio recording of Queen Elizabeth herself, explaining her wishes in her own voice. When Camilla learned what had happened, she tried one last desperate move. She was prepared to challenge Elizabeth's mental clarity at the time the deed was signed, to claim that an elderly queen had been manipulated. King Charles, despite his own frailty, shut it down immediately. Any attempt to undermine Elizabeth's will, he said,
She pledged in a broadcast from Cape Town to the Commonwealth to devote her life, whether it be short or long, to the service of her people,
would be treated as sedition against the crown's memory. And finally, Oakridge, the last estate, a sealed leather envelope presented to the Prime Minister, confirming the transfer. The Queen's personal hearth during family disputes. The cradle of William's childhood summers. The place where a little boy first learned what it meant to belong to something bigger than himself. Where Elizabeth's private will contained a clause titled Anticipatory Obstruction, nullifying any challenge from individuals married into the family after 2010. When that clause was read aloud, Camilla stormed out of the room. Tom cursed his lawyers. And Princess Anne, sitting quietly through all of it, turned to King Charles and said, "I always knew this day would come." The meaning of it all: step back and think about what Elizabeth actually did. She didn't just leave her grandson some property. She built a legal fortress around him, layer by layer, estate by estate, clause by clause. She anticipated the commercial proposals before they were written. She anticipated the legal probes before they were filed. She anticipated the back-channel lobbying before it started. She built answers to every single challenge years before those challenges existed. And the question that sits at the heart of all of this is a painful one. Why did she feel this level of protection was necessary? And the answer is that within her own family, within the institution she gave her entire life to, she identified people whose priorities were not legacy, not service, not the future of the monarchy. They were commercial. They were personal. They were about turning 7 centuries of royal heritage into a hospitality brand. Elizabeth chose William because she saw in him what those others lacked. Not ambition, not a hunger for profit, but the willingness to quietly catalog wartime letters in a vault that no camera would ever film. To walk the cedar groves with his grandmother and listen more than he spoke. Stewardship. That was the word she inscribed into every covenant, and she understood it was not a common quality. William's response to every single one of these attacks was the same. He didn't escalate publicly. He didn't give press conferences. He didn't issue statements of outrage. He signed charters, and he walked with his children. He let the architecture his grandmother built speak for him, and it spoke loudly enough to make every scheme, every holding company, every corporate mock-up completely and permanently irrelevant. But here's the question that lingers long after the doors of the estate have closed. What will William do with a legacy that was meticulously engineered before he even knew it existed? Every clause, every hidden safeguard, every quiet instruction was part of a game only Elizabeth II could orchestrate. And now the board is his. Will he honor the Queen's strategy? Or will new ambitions reshape it entirely? The story is far from over, and the next move could change everything.